on. So, Ellie, it's good to see you again. And you are our insight into the Jewish philanthropic world. So I'm capturing you today so that you can share with those of us who hate having to deal with money, but want to make amazing things happen. What would you have to tell us? Tell us something about your experiences since October 7th. How has the dynamic of the landscape of Jewish philanthropy looked to you?
Elana, good to see you. Thank you to everyone at Israel Forever. I think first and foremost, we have to recognize the causes that have made a transformative difference since October 7th, arguably before, but certainly we feel it a lot more. And Israel Forever is one of those causes since it has unified, it's brought together Jewish people, friends of Israel from all around the world, and with a real simple message of empowerment, of bringing people, of unity, of solidarity. And we need to hear that more, because as I travel the Jewish world and I see now on every continent fear dictating agenda, that's a worrying place. And I think it's understandable as we see what's unfolding in communities, on campuses, as we see what the media many people consume is telling them, which we know is not the full truth, if anything but a lie. So they are dealing with, on a daily basis, a challenge to their values, a challenge to their beliefs. And whether they be a philanthropist, an activist, a community leader, or simply someone who thought that before October 7th, they could be Jewish, they could affiliate lightly, they could even go around a campus or elsewhere and not be known. Now they're realizing they have to stand up for their Jewish rights, they have to stand up for their values, because in many, many places these are being challenged. And I would say these are universal values of peace, of tolerance, of respecting the other, of how we have dialogue. And so a lot of things have come to the surface since October 7th, and that is having a ripple effect on philanthropy. Philanthropists are feeling incredibly challenged by the need, by this competition of need, domestic, of course, in Israel, where people we know have been suffering, whether they be in the south, the north, the tremendous impact on mental health. And so there's this competition of need. And if I were to reflect, the first thing I would say in the last few months is one of gratitude. With all the challenges in philanthropy and other sectors, it is remarkable how generous people have been, how generous the Friends of Israel, of the Jewish people, the humanitarian voices have been. It's unprecedented, the volume of giving. And now the question is how to allocate that funding, how to make sure it makes a difference and an impact.
I think that there is a great concern there that there is not full transparency on the usage of the funds that have been raised since October 7th. The initial phase of giving was so immediate and very scattered in many ways. And there were, of course, people who created campaigns and they didn't reach their intended recipients. And that continues to be a problem, but also giving since then, after, all these months, has also reduced significantly. So you saw this immediate empathy and a desire to give, but we're also seeing not complete, a clarity on what that giving means. Will people continue to give? How are they holding the funders accountable, making sure that they're able to make an impact? And I think that that's a big question for a lot of people. We primarily focus on programmatic directed giving, which means that someone is able to select a program that speaks to their heart, and they can become a sponsor. They can just donate to that project, whether it's the distribution of Healing Hearts cards or Healing Hearts mosaic activities for displaced families. But then there's also what's going on in the diaspora, and we need the distribution of our Beyond the Lies resources. We want to be able to get them into the hands, and yet we face the obstacle of not having the ability financially to cover that type of activism. Do you think that there will be or is starting to be a change in the way philanthropists might consider seeing the tangible elements of how they could be making a difference with their money?
So I think you addressed two really important points. One is, if I, the donor, I want to give, how do I know if my philanthropic dollars are going to get to the destination, to the cause? And there I think the due diligence is important, to know that the person you're giving to and the entity is obviously registered, if it's in the United States, as a 501c3, and that you know that you're giving to a reliable source. I think that's just very important. And there, on the side of the allocation of funds, I think there has been a realization that we do not know. We do not know the scope of need. There's still tremendous uncertainty. If we take Israel as an example, with the Northern Front and Hezbollah and Iran and its proxies, every day firing on the north, causing fires, causing damage to property, and as we know, tens of thousands of Israelis cannot return to their homes. So what does that mean for a philanthropist? Is there sufficient medical supplies? What does it mean for the displaced families? How long will that go on for? If only we knew. And please God, it'll be
Right.
for the minimum amount of time. But a philanthropist is also being cautious now. As you said, there was this emotional reaction, understandably, to want to give. I met people in Australia who said that people just knocked on the door and said, "We're giving to Israel. Don't ask for what, don't ask for how." And now they are asking, because many months have passed.
As well they should. As
And
well they should. But look at what happened. So you've described the physical war and the needs of the physical war on one hand, and those are very severe needs. And then you have the emotional needs of Israeli society, because we don't get humanitarian aid. We don't
right,
get assistance. There are more networks of volunteer therapists giving from their own time, their family time, from their livelihood, to be able to provide therapy to those who are bereaved, even the survivors of October 7th. We are not even hearing many of their stories because they can't cope. The post-trauma is so severe for some of them,
right.
and the care is only insular within Israel. So everyone just expects Israel to cover all these bases: our military needs, our civic needs, our humanitarian needs, and emotional needs, to overcome the trauma that October 7th created. And let's not forget, by the way, our entire system of faith in our leadership in Israel is being continuously questioned and attacked, and rightly so, and that's a whole other discussion. But why are we not also asking the same of diaspora leadership and of diaspora donors? And I do not mean, God forbid, any disrespect, but there has to be the ability to ask the legitimate question to the people who, someone like myself, I can't reach the big donors out there. I can't get my letters, my campaigns to them, because the due diligence that you mentioned is and understandably so. Again, it requires so much leaping through the hoops of bureaucracy and paperwork that it just feels impossible to encourage diaspora leadership to examine their own behaviors in the same way they're expecting Israel to, and the way money is spent, so that it isn't only on huge marketing campaigns to do whatever campaign they're doing, with each
Right.
organization doing their own, but rather to fund the projects that can make a tangible difference on keeping Israel strong as a people, both in Israel and in the diaspora. The strength that they could be empowering, it just feels like with all the money being raised, something's not happening right. And again, with no disrespect, but I want to add one more thing before you respond, Ellie. Those of us in Israel don't always hear about some of the campaigns and projects that are underway around the world. So we feel this dissonance of what is actually happening. We're shouting, bring them home now. We know what our organizations are involved in. We know that there's these great parades and there's rallies. What more is happening, and how is Jewish philanthropy of today enabling that?
So you ask the right questions that I would say, first of all, it's been remarkable to see philanthropy step up, as in many people have said in the past, my giving areas are A, B, and C, but now during this crisis, I am creating an emergency fund, or I am
Hmm.
giving, doubling up, increasing my giving at this time. And so we've seen not just generosity, but more flexibility. And I think not just are you asking the right questions, but a serious philanthropist wants to hear those questions. Because I learned from the school back in my starting days in the JDC, in the Joint Distribution Committee, that a philanthropist appreciates good learning opportunity and education, and that our job to, as Israelis, as activists in the Jewish world, is to serve as an educator more than a fundraiser, to be able to say to the philanthropist, these are the real needs from our perspective. Now, from their perspective, what's interesting is a shift. In the first few months following October 7th, there were immediate needs, and I would argue there still are immediate needs. You touched on mental health. In December, a prominent professor from Jerusalem, from a mental health institute, said 1 in 10 Israelis will be struggling with some form of trauma or PTSD. I would argue it's much higher because not everyone
Okay.
seeks medical attention. But he referred to it as a tsunami of mental health need. And so that is an area that I think will be top of mind for many years. And it's an
Many
area
years. I
where
think that's the other problem. It's not necessarily a tsunami. It is worse
mm,
because it is going to bubble under the surface and it's going to affect our children.
right.
Only in a few years will we see the impact that this has had, especially on the middle school, younger grades. We don't realize, the impact. Mothers whose husbands are in Miluim and whose children cannot. I was just talking with a woman the other day, and she said her daughter does not. Throughout the day, she will just suddenly burst into tears, and then suddenly she'll be okay.
So,
That's
so
that's not a child who says, I'm going to go to a trauma therapy and the mother's going to deal with that while she's dealing with 3 other kids and a husband that's in Gaza for 200 days. She's not going to focus on that, but in a couple of years, and we can only hope that there won't be another war and an
and
increase.
PTSD takes many months to kick in. It may not,
Yeah.
as you've identified, we may not even be seeing the tip of the iceberg. But here is the shift. If all eyes were on Israel following October from a philanthropic perspective, we've also seen a surge in anti Semitism, in hate, where that's often cloaked in, we're just against Israeli policy. But no,
Mhm.
actually, from your rhetoric and actions and affiliations, those who are, creating chaos on campus, disorder, acting unlawfully, are being anti Semitic. And so we're seeing a rise in anti Semitism and denial of October 7th and other forms of online hatred grow at record levels. So philanthropists are also saying, what do I need to do to protect my own community and my own family, wherever they may live? And what's, I wouldn't say shocking, but remarkable, is when philanthropic institutions overseas are saying, could we learn from you, Israel, how to become more resilient? Because we don't have the same resilience because we haven't been traumatized the way you
That's
have in
right.
Israel.
That's
So it's this strange dynamic where they're asking for mental health professionals, which there are a shortage of in Israel, to help educate teen programs, summer camps, and other
as
entities.
well we should. As
And
well
so,
we should.
right.
It is time. It is time for the diaspora to understand, and my great respect for diaspora communal existence and all that they have dealt with over the years, we cannot ignore that there are areas of failing. And that is the opportunity, I'm sorry to say, but the opportunity that October 7th brings about. In Israel, what we saw after October 7th was the civic responsibility was awakened, and the society is one of the most important elements that has come to the aid of our own nation. We have volunteerism is high, not just giving. Giving is out of control in ways that nobody had ever seen before. We want to see that also awaken in the diaspora, that they can recognize it's time for them to learn from Israel how to become, as I always say, Israel strong. This isn't an Israel of today like our military, but how have we lasted for 4,000 years? Because we have been strong as a nation, spiritually, physically, conceptually. We have been able to embrace who we are. And in the years of assimilation, and this isn't the only generation that's faced assimilation challenges, but in the years of assimilation, we see more and more people finding ways to say it's not my fight. The war and that's Israel's fault. And we see, by the way, a lot of it today, young Jews who are saying, old and young Jews who are saying, I'm sorry, we're not responsible for Israel's crimes. So somehow separating themselves as if the anti-Semitism isn't really a hatred of Jews. We're not responsible. Don't hate me. In Germany, they did the same thing. It was the Ostjuden. It was the Eastern Jews that they hated. They didn't really hate us. So as long as you separated the Eastern born Jews from the German Jews would be saved. So now that's happening in America with the Zionists and the Jews. But eventually, even Herzl said in the late 1800s, we think we're so different one from the other, but at the end of the day, the haters, they put us all together. We are one in their eyes, and we have to keep being one. So we have to now examine, by the way, the patterns of Jewish organizational leadership during those times as well, and the patterns of giving. Were they also shifted? So this is something that has always fascinated me, and I've seen, yes. In fact, after October 7th, we see many similar patterns of how the organizations started to band together. The society started to become more involved, and the denial from within the Jewish community also starts to show its face. That no, it's not me. And so we see a different kind of splintering away of the Jewish community. And I'm, again, bringing it back to the question of philanthropy and funding. It's all based on funding. How can we encourage donors who we can't reach?
So
they've got how can we encourage donors who we can't reach easily, and they've got their organized methods of giving? How can we reach them with the grassroots needs of grassroots activism to meet the reality that we are facing today?
First of all, I would encourage all of our viewers to talk in that language of one. And so wherever we reside, we can affiliate, we can be part of Israel. And that's why I love Israel Forever's VCI, the Virtual Citizen of Israel program, because it allows people to be a part of Israel wherever they live, because ultimately it doesn't matter where you are living physically when you're being under attack on a campus. There are realities that not everyone is going to relocate or make aliyah. And I would say, as an Israeli, I welcome them here. But we also have to strengthen Jewish life wherever it is and make sure people feel that oneness, that togetherness. And VCI is one initiative that I am reaching out to philanthropists and saying, for a small investment, you can make a transformative difference. And so I think part of it,
Imagine what we can do.
Imagine,
Ellie, I have to just, every time you and I talk about it and you get what VCI is, and you are out there helping Israel Forever to expand this vision that I created long ago when I was still living in America, and all I did was want to be in Israel and feel so connected to Israel. And there was this war and there was that war, and I felt as if I was a citizen. So we want to just, first of all, Ellie, say thank you for helping to bring VCI to the eyes, ears, and hearts of those philanthropists. And somebody is going to see this as an investment, the essential investment in the Jewish future. It really is.
So Elana, I touch on your question around philanthropists. They have been spending a lot of time learning going to conferences, trying to understand the data, which is complicated at the moment because there's a lot of trends, a lot of need. They're trying to understand how to make a difference. So when you mention grassroots initiatives, one thing I encourage them to do is to use their position as a philanthropist to encourage greater coordination, collaboration between organizations, that each can bring their strength. But when we work together, we'll be more efficient and we will avoid a lot of the duplication. There is not a need for dozens of campus organizations. There is a need for organizations to work effectively on campus. And therefore, when you bring the people who have the right content, the people who have the right marketing and outreach, and the right allyship, it was something I want to address as well, then you can have an effective campaign and response. But when everyone is working in a silo and everyone is funding their own project, that's not the most effective way in any sector. So we have to encourage people working together. Sometimes the best initiatives come from the grassroots, and they're also the quickest, the most flexible, and good, return on investment because they have no overhead or minimal cost. And so I encourage people to look at grassroots initiatives, and they can also use platforms such as Israel Forever to be able to provide a donor a tax-deductible receipt. So they're getting their credit, tax credit, but they're also reaching the end user, the person who needs that intervention, who needs that support. There are, of course, these big legacy organizations that philanthropists are very involved in. And I don't think we should discourage that, but we should help them understand the need and understand that now is not a time for committee think, but to be effective, to be fast, to be agile. But I wouldn't discourage people who feel an affiliation with a certain organization. I would say to them, come and visit Israel for yourself, see for yourself the need, or come and explore what the issues are in your community. Ultimately, a philanthropist is just like anyone else here. They have been privileged, you could say. They're in a fortunate position, which comes with a tremendous responsibility of being able to help, of being able to be a catalyst of change. But that doesn't always mean that they want to be in that position. They may want others around them, spiritual leaders, community leaders, to give them direction, to help them navigate what is a very difficult period where if it's their business and their investors who are challenging them purely by association to Israel or to being Jewish, then it's a difficult time. And we're noticing philanthropists standing up and saying, if you were funding an institution that cannot protect the Jewish community or others, if it cannot uphold the rule of law, then consider carefully whether you should be donating to that institution, because there are many other institutions that will reflect your values, that will enable change, and they are aligned with you and your identity. And so people are waking up to realize that there is a certain responsibility on giving out funds, but also on the people receiving the funds to be living up to the standards that we expect. Otherwise, there is a choice, and they can take those funds and apply them elsewhere. And we're seeing more serious philanthropists stepping up and challenging the system.
It is so refreshing and enlightening to hear that, because there is kind of a wall of distance between those who are involved in grassroots efforts and the larger philanthropic world. I personally feel it. And that's why we do provide this role as a fiscal sponsor for so many of the grassroots efforts, so that we can help them not have to jump through the hoops and can feature programs. Our Healing Hearts Mosaics program, where we have reached at this point several thousand displaced families and communities with the opportunity to go to experience hands-on therapy by literally taking the broken shards and piecing together something beautiful. And we have succeeded in keeping this going, and we have more and more requests, spearheaded by one woman who this was her dream. And this was what she wanted to do, Miriam, and she came to Israel Forever, and we continue to succeed. We have several fiscal sponsorship opportunities like this, where it has been coming from a grassroots agenda, and it also demonstrates that some of these people are involved with other organizations, and that shouldn't stop us. Even my mentor, Eli Wiesel, always was an example that you did not have to have one place where you belonged as a Jew. We belong, all of us together, and we can give here and there. There's a great story I have to share, actually, from my dad that he used to tell about his grandpa, who back in the day, you used to get in the mail the request for donations to all the different organizations. And he would take all of these envelopes, because of course it was an envelope that you had to send back, and he would be very careful, and he would write everything out, and he would give to every organization $1, because that's what he could afford. Mm-hmm. And then as the years went on, if he could afford more, but he would give to everybody. And that it's this amazing opportunity to say we have other ways where we can divide up our money and have a really direct impact, because that's what the grassroots projects do. They are, I've worked with units where we are providing ceramic vests and helmets, and I can tell you all of this 647 soldiers, and these soldiers of Yatar, the 72 elite reserve soldiers, to be able to provide something for them, and the 646 unit, and how many soldiers that they've also lost, and what are we able to do to be able to get enough small donations so that we can provide them with drones, which we know for a fact have saved lives. So you have this, and you have the emotional therapy, and every Jew out there and friend of Israel out there can be involved in advocacy by actually using their voice, but they can also actually just use their hands and give, and it doesn't always have to be on a global scale of one massive donation. And I hope philanthropists could be exposed to more grassroots organizations so that we can create the collaboratives that you've suggested, and hopefully they're hearing are the wise choice for the future. Because if we want them to navigate their choices best, we want them to understand not that measurable impact. You mentioned the conferences and the data. There are some ways that those are the real numbers of the measurable impact. But at the end of the day, even the data presented in conferences, this is all just digital and not human. It's not our heart, and it's not really what's the impact that we have when we inspire. Every time I consult with people, I think, am I making an impact? We have a monthly webinar on the 7th of every month since October 7th. And, we have anywhere from 20 to 200 people who join, and then 2,000 to 5,000 people who watch later on. Think, am I making an impact? Because my numbers in the eyes of, philanthropists, Ellie, I'm a pipsqueak. I've had a big philanthropist say to me, you're irrelevant on the scale of impact. And I think to myself,
size fits all. There are philanthropists who are looking for the big numbers, the big, birthright style initiatives that will reach every Jew. And there are those.
Listen, don't get me started. Where is Birthright, Ellie? I want to know. Where is Birthright, which has got this huge budget, and they have 350,000 alumni? I want to know, where are the funders of Birthright focusing so that other organizations who have the great stuff to offer can reach the alumni, and that way it's a different style of philanthropic collaboration between generations, between experiences that have been building for over 2 decades. I think that you mentioned again the trends, and I think we have to create that trend, the trend of Jewish unity collaboration that allows the grassroots, who has 1, 2, 4 people on their staff, to even have a voice in the game.
So, first of all, I think there are people committed to the programs that they were funding before the war, to ensure they can sustain themselves during this period and adapt. So there are groups obviously still visiting, but fewer. And so there are groups that are saying, how can we educate our alumni? How can we provide education domestically? How do we adapt? We saw during COVID a big push on philanthropy to adapt and on organizations to adapt. And here we are a few years later, and we may have forgotten the impact of that period, but it was quite profound on humanity and on philanthropy. And so there's a lot of learning going on at the moment as to how do I address the constant change in need, what I like to describe as the difference between immediate and strategic. And we're now in that period where we have to be more strategic in our giving. And I'll say a couple of things on that. First of all, everyone can give. Just that beautiful story there of a grandparent who would give $1. I met with funders who would say, is everyone in your organization giving? Everyone on staff? Are they giving of $18? Because then they too are a philanthropist. Changes the conversation. There's no us and them. It's us.
I love that.
And
That's
so
beautiful.
I said, okay, how will that make a difference? And they said, well, one of the ways we measure is how many people are giving, not how much they're giving. So if you have a big distribution list and more of them are giving, and that's also giving of time, and that's measured in kind, all the wonderful volunteerism and activism, then we will match that at our level, which will be higher as a major gift funder. And so they do look at the giving level. And the other piece of advice they provided, which was counterintuitive, was that there isn't a shortage of money, there's a shortage of people asking. And so that's where we have to break through that taboo, where asking for support for a project shouldn't make us feel uncomfortable, but really should come from a place of pride. I'm really proud of my initiative, of my grassroots effort, and will you partner with me? Will you join me? Not, that there's this iron wall and fence around a philanthropist, but no, they're accessible. They want to feel they are part of a community. And so obviously there are exceptions to what I'm sharing, but I would encourage people to see themselves as philanthropists, to give, or at least as altruists, as I like to say, give of their time, of their wisdom, give in a way that you can, in a meaningful way, and be part of the ecosystem. If you see something is not right, I can assure you there's an NGO that exists to fix it, or will create a few. There's tremendous civil society that has come forward in the last few months and has really been there, I would say, at times, even ahead of government, and quicker and more agile and save the day. And now we have to be more strategic. So it's not just that everyone should give, but it should also be a reflection on what are we giving to and how are we positioning ourselves in the world. So I think a natural reaction to October 7th was more giving to Israel and more giving to fight anti-Semitism. Both are needed. But what about the community, the broader society we are living in? How do we create coalitions with people of other faiths, with people of other cultures who share our values, who are looking at what's happening and are in equal shock and concern? How do we create allyship beyond our traditional groupings? And I think that in an ironic way, we can learn from our adversaries, the people who created the most unexpected coalitions, who are out there protesting without even knowing where Israel is or what they're protesting for or against. Some level of belonging has brought them together with terror groups and their affiliates to protest in what they think are the right human rights. So the world is a little upside down. I certainly feel that way and have to remind myself, of our moral compass and of our direction. But we also have to learn, okay, well, who in this period has surprised me by their lack of, let's say, understanding, knowledge, and I'm being generous. In some cases, I don't believe people are coming from a position of hate. There's a lot of ignorance. But who is someone who could be persuaded or open to joining the right coalition, the people on the right side of history, the people who are really fighting for the civilians and for peace in the neighborhood. And that's where I think they're out there. I think they're out there both in the region, in the Middle East. I think they're out there globally, but they need
And in our own
an
communities.
extended arm, an
And in
extended.
our own communities.
Yes, well, of
And
course,
in people's own communities. And that's the beauty of being a VCI. Why do we have this global community construct? Because we sometimes think that we are pretty isolated. The world hates us. I live far away. I'm not Israeli. So instead, we have the ability to have this, kind of title of recognition, so to speak, this badge where we can go and we can proclaim ourselves. So I'm presenting to the school board or the council person as a virtual citizen of Israel. It becomes a name. And then we welcome, of course, with VCI, we have non-Jewish members of our global community, pilgrims, the VCI Pilgrim community, where people can start to create in their own networks small collaboratives. They don't even have to only be local. They can also be virtual because we gain
excellent.
strength. We always say, all of us, stronger together. Let's actually build these little enclaves of strength, whether they are in our local community or virtual, and allow ourselves to express being a virtual citizen with civic responsibility to the concept and the destiny of the land and people of Israel, because we have to stop thinking about it only as whether or not somebody is carrying the Israeli passport that at this point is, carte blanche, like it's not even accepted anywhere in countries in the world, but as a VCI, people everywhere can have a voice, and they can start to create the allyship from the from the bottom up, and that way we can draw the attention of people. I always say that we're the startup nation, and we have all of these venture capitalists and investors, and if we start to realize that an investment in the Jewish future, the investment in VCI as a VCI, either through activism or funding, these are ways where we can shift the way that money is being distributed and the action is being distributed, and we can do more from a tangible perspective that actually feels the strength. And instead of being a donor, you're an investor.
Beautiful.
And that's what we need to see.
I would say
we need to see more people seeing philanthropy as a style of investment, and the return on that investment can even have some financial benefit, but truly it is the existential benefit of supporting the future. And we have looked to partner with all of the big organizations out there. You and I both sit on the Global Jury, which is this collaborative, and we all have a great love for its leader, Sandy Cardin, and we see, and he has promoted VCI as well. He himself is a recognized VCI. We have Alan Dershowitz, who's a recognized virtual citizen of Israel and the honorary chairman from a decade ago. So maybe one of the things we can do is, again, encourage investment, both from the philanthropic world, but also the common society, as you said, to see themselves as a part of that philanthropic world, to see themselves as the investors and the leaders, and not only rely on a top-down model, but build the Jewish unity we want to see to save our Jewish future.
Beautiful. And I would add to it two elements, that if we were wise investors and leaders, we will commit to learning. We will commit to education. And, just go to the Israel Forever website and see the remarkable range of educational resource, or choose another place, or even say, I'm going to commit and learn, zoom out and see other perspectives, just so that I understand the complexity or the multi-layer nature of it. But commit to learning, because first of all, it'll help the way we give. But I think it's also a Jewish response to a time of tragedy, adversity, is that we are spiritually connected. We are committed educationally. Our response to terrorism is not just solidarity and unity, but being really strong in our beliefs and strong in our knowledge. And I think that that gives us a strength in how we act, in how we distribute support. The more knowledge, the better. The second thing I'll say
And how
is,
we talk to our children.
of
And how we
course,
talk to our children.
a
How we bring it home. We have just seen that there is one school whose, after the last day of school, the teachers posted themselves in their terror kafia saying, now we can come out, as if this was their, declaration of coming out, in pride. And these people are embedded in our schools, and they are embedded in our communities, and how we talk to each other and how we talk to our children and amongst our family on Shabbat, or whenever we can try to create these gatherings for intimate discussion. As I said, we try to do it virtually, but everybody has the ability to go to that old school style salon gathering, host a watercolors and wine, and you can do something that's a tzedakah for the Jews of Israel
right,
or victims of anti-Semitism in America, which is, by the way, something else that we do. We've been providing letters of support to communities that have experienced anti-Semitism and tools for how do you talk to your kids and your family about this. Well, you don't want to evoke fear. You don't want to make it paranoid or panic. No. But when you say education, Ellie, a lot of people say, okay, let's fund schools. I want to come from the mentality of the informal educational world, because that is where I truly believe the greatest impact is, that in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, the October 7th war is always remembered as the attack on Israel and the awakening of Israel's responsibility for increased security and defense of not only in our borders, but everywhere a Jew lives. Right now, the rhetoric is that October 7th started Israel's war on Gaza, and we have to do, and Wikipedia has completely been co-opted now by all of these extremist writers because they have more people, and we are going to continue to see small losses of battles in this war. We have to make sure that the October 7th war on the Jewish people is never, ever distorted, because it's only another level of how they dehumanize Jews. And the philanthropists and the educators and the families, the virtual citizens of Israel, the people of all ages, only if we start to, you emphasized it earlier, we both said we have to talk in a language of one. And that's true. You and I, we live in Israel. We know that here there is not also a language of one. And that's a problem. But we do have more people insisting that that language be maintained. So you hear the extremism, and then it's being, no, guys, let's come back because we know biyachad nenatzeach, together we will win. And I say, biyachad nenatzeach, together, Israelis, Israel, the diaspora. And the diaspora has to be with us in that together. And that philanthropy must be directed to helping every element. I hope, Ellie, that you're effective and successful in opening up the eyes of those that you manage to reach. I know you are everywhere. You are in Guatemala and the United Arab Emirates, and you are everywhere where anti-Semitism is on the rise, and you're at every conference. And we are so grateful for people like you to be able to bring our reality to the different reality. That's all we can't say it's better, it's worse. The different reality of the perspective of the Jew who lives outside of this war of seven fronts in our land, because it's a war of seven fronts outside as well. We've got to come together. So whatever you're doing to help advance that voice, thank you. So any of you out there, come and check us out at israelforever.org. Thank you for being with us today. Ellie, thank you for your wisdom and for your passion, because the Jewish people need people like you, and we are really grateful for your voice. Thank you so much.